Okay, then I think we can just wait for people to keep coming and joining us so we can just get started. So welcome, Krista. Uh, and this is our Epic India's first Instagram Live, so it's very special to have you here. Just to introduce Krista to everyone, Krista is the Air Quality Life Index Director and also the Director of the Air Quality Programs at Epic. Just to give a quick introduction to what Epic India does, Epic India was launched in 2014 as part of the Epic's vision to help India tackle its energy and environment challenges. We do so by doing rigorous, innovative, evidence-backed research and work with partnerships with research institutes, governments, and other stakeholders. We work in the nexus of energy and environment challenges and try to come up with solutions for energy crisis and also air pollution. Today's topic of discussion is addressing air pollution. It is talking about air quality data gaps. And we all know one of the ways to solve air pollution is having reliable data. And so we are going to talk about the gaps in air quality data. So just further, before we go into the questions, I just wanted to have a quick understanding and for you to explain to everybody what AQLI essentially is. We know it's the Air Quality Life Index. So what essentially is it, if you could tell us a little about it and what probably the latest report that was recently launched was all about?
Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity to do this. This is my first Instagram Live, so exciting. So the AQLI, the Air Quality Life Index, is simply a way to capture the impact of air pollution on our life expectancy. Air pollution, as most of us know, can be somewhat intangible. We can see it, we can find it annoying, but we can't necessarily feel the impact it has on our lives. And so the AQLI is an attempt to figure out what that impact is in a very tangible way that decision makers and the public can use. And what we do each year annually is to capture that impact with the latest satellite-derived PM 2.5 data, where one can look from the country level down to the province or state level, down to the county or district level, what that impact is in your community. And so we've just launched that report. We'll talk about some of the specifics here, but across the globe, we're seeing that people are losing 2.3 years of life expectancy due to PM 2.5 pollution, which is more than HIV, AIDS, malaria, say car crashes, as well as other diseases combined. So it has a huge yet under the radar impact on our lives.
I mean, the numbers are clearly very startling, and we now at least the conversation is, the ball is rolling. We hear a lot about air pollution these days. So, I mean, it's good that there's a report and there are numbers to support this, that it actually has more grave health impacts than something like, HIV, AIDS, or like, smoking. So we had a few questions coming in the last couple of weeks. So we would just like to probably go through them. So one was poor air quality is a reality we're living to learn with. Is there a way we can fix it? I mean, is there a one-stop solution to it?
Yeah, I would say that the very first part of that question gets me. I think one of the scariest things I hear is when we hear about air pollution as something we have to learn to live with. It's not wrong. When every day is a poor air quality day, you can't help but learn to live with it. But my worry is that something so catastrophic, like extremely poor air quality, that's taking years off of our lives, becomes every day we lose the urgency to address the issue, or we treat it as something that an individual has to deal with, something that to find your own personal Band-Aid for, when really the solution to air pollution is not a single bullet, but it does require, we know, collective action. I think the specifics to solve air pollution anywhere vary a ton on the local context, but ultimately they do require sustained political action and sustained political will, as well as social resources.
Right. So you said like there's a lot of people sort of that's involved, a lot of bodies, a lot of actionable people and groups that need to come together to make solutions for air pollution. And I would think one would be the citizens, the citizens demanding air pollution per se. So we had a question in this sort of similar lines, which was, for a citizen to demand clean air, what role do you think analyst-ready data has a role to play in it?
Yeah, in my mind, it's less about a single citizen demanding clean air, but really making sure that whole sectors that have some relevancy to air pollution have access to basic air quality data infrastructure that they need to move efforts forward. So an important example is a policy analyst can't do basic policy analysis unless they have that timely data. For example, there's a ton of data produced by the government, but the data are not yet made available in a fully open way. By this, I mean the data are not available in physical data forms, like micrograms per cubic meter for PM 2.5, or programmatic access, like an application programming interface. Those two combined are really powerful for really letting a waterfall of activities happen after that. But that's not happening yet.
Yeah, so even though you're saying the data might be available, it's not even understandable to a local person or a citizen who's accessing it, right?
It's partly that, and then partly even when data is shared in a way that you can see on a table or a graph on a website, that's only unlocking a piece of how that data can be accessed. Otherwise, if you have it available in a way that, say, a software developer or an air pollution scientist can get to in a really reliable way, that's when you start seeing the maximal use you can get from that data. That costs a lot of money to produce and maintain every year, so it's important to see that whole use case of the data be played out.
Right. So in terms of people, like you said, like they may have access to data or sometimes have limited access, but is there any other tool that you think is available that can probably increase pollution literacy among people, that is accessible, it's free, it's easy to understand and easy to use probably?
Yeah, I think, there's a wealth of tools out there that one can use. Even I think Wikipedia and government websites can be a great spot for beginners. A great site called urbanemissions.org is an Indian-based site that looks at emissions levels across India, but also the world, and really takes you up to the next level. And we also hope the Air Quality Life Index site at aqli.epic.uchicago.edu can be something that's really friendly for the general public to look at their own how PM 2.5 is impacting their own life expectancy, but also get some background information about what air pollution is and why it matters.
Right. So from you mentioned AQLI, we'll obviously drop the link somewhere to all our viewers here. But considering the recent AQLI report, which you co-authored, do you think there are any funding gaps because of which in the air quality entire infrastructure, because of which solutions are not being dealt that quickly and the turnaround time is not that quick? Do you think there are funding gaps somewhere?
Yeah, I think there's a huge philanthropic funding gap for air pollution in general issues, and then especially in the places where that burden's being felt the most. So according to the Clean Air Fund's 2022 report that looked at this landscape, about $64 million per year go from philanthropies towards air pollution issues globally. That's a drop in the bucket. And India, the largest chunk, I think it's 14.2 million, more than any other Asian country. But again, that's still just a tiny bit. So it's a huge opportunity, I would say, for philanthropists across the world to get involved in.
Definitely. Yeah. So we'll just look at one of the other questions we got, which was your report indicates the air quality report. South Asia is the global epicenter of the air pollution problem. There may not be a silver bullet to this, but are there any policy recommendations for countries like India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Pakistan?
Yeah, I think it's tricky to figure out like what the exact solution should be for any given country, especially when you're not in that country. But I think we can look to other countries to see what we've seen be successful. China, notably in most recent and dramatic fashion in the past several years, and policies they've implemented. But I also think, especially say in the case of India, what's astounding to me is the absolute wealth of expertise that already exists from the policy sector to the medical science to atmospheric science, and then really just finding ways to support those activities already going on and amplifying their work. And I would say the other low-hanging fruit, and I've already touched on it, is making that data accessible that already exists to
Right.
more.
Right. Okay, so one more question was somebody from living who's a resident of Delhi had written to us saying there's always bad news around Delhi and its air pollution crisis. Is there any good news that somebody can take back from the air quality life index report?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we do highlight several examples, as I mentioned, of how pollution has changed rapidly in other countries. I mentioned China from 2013 to 2021, there was a 42% reduction in PM 2.5. And I think that underscores to me something that I think is fairly intuitive, that if we decide to reduce PM 2.5 pollution, it can happen fast. It's unlike climate change, it's related to climate change, obviously, the sources underlying it, but unlike climate change, you can turn off that tap of the pollution, and you can see an immediate impact. And I think that's incredibly heartening. Meanwhile, I mean, in India, there's NCAP, the National Clean Air Program. That's a reason to have hope. Delhi is one of the 131 cities that the policy targets, and really quite ambitiously. So I think there's definite reason to have hope, and to have hope in the short term, if that collective will and resources are unlocked.
We hope so. Like it's there, we have been seeing a lot of policy, schemes and new programs coming into action, and we can only hope that Delhi hopefully does not stay in headlines for the wrong reasons, especially in the pollution season per se. So, based on what you just said, I understand that India is always on the news, and there has been a lot of bad news per se in relation to air pollution. But does the latest AQLI report suggest any improvement in any of the states in India, especially probably in the North Indian belt?
Yeah, so to your point, most of the data at the district level and the state level for India appears to be going in not positive direction. But we do see that 36 districts in Uttar Pradesh, 22 in Bihar, 4 in Haryana, 1 in Punjab have seen improvements since 2019 when that NCAP was first instituted. So that's hopeful. And in particular, Amethi in Uttar Pradesh has seen the greatest improvement since 2019, where we've seen a 10 micrograms per cubic meter of PM 2.5 decrease, and that equates, we estimate, to 10.7 months of added life expectancy if those levels are sustained. That's a critical point. But I think those are hopeful numbers, and hopefully start to build on.
Hopefully the numbers are going to increase too for all of the states and districts. I mean, that should be the subtext of the AQLI report, right? Like giving out positive news. So is there any reason why you think it's the North Indian belt in India that is always pollution heavy? And that sort of seems to go and stretch to Bangladesh also, which is now the most polluted country in the world. It has even outranked India. So do you think there is a reason why this belt is always so pollution heavy? Is there a geographical reason? What is your say on that?
Yeah, it's a combination of factors that really make it kind of a superstorm. So it is the geographical location, that mostly the area is landlocked, it's meteorological conditions, but then it's also emissions, from agricultural burning to industrial activity, to vehicular pollution and residential cooking. And then I think amplifying all that is a population increase. So I think it's just this superstorm of where humans are, more humans are every year, and also the underlying practices. And then, on top of that, not yet having the policy to really get it under control.
Right. And since we are discussing policy and data gaps in this session, what do you think, what would you like to tell or explain to our viewers that how does AQLI work in this aspect? How are we providing that data, and where are we sourcing our data from?
Yeah, so the underlying PM 2.5 data we use is from satellite-derived data from a group at the University of Washington at St. Louis. The reason we use that data is because it gives us really wonderful global coverage at a fairly granular, again, like district or county level coverage. But I will also say the great thing with the AQLI is it doesn't need to be applied to a specific PM 2.5 data set. It can be applied to any longer term, say, annual data set. at the local level from ground monitoring, doesn't have to be satellite derived. So it can be applied in many ways, and we use it in this particular way because it gives us this global snapshot to understand every year.
Right. So is there a way where, so I understand that AQLI, say the report 2023 is based off data that is being collected from the past, right? So is there a way, or there has been improvement in terms of collecting data in more timely fashion? Is there scope in that? What's the future of that data collection look like?
Yeah, so both for satellite derived data and for ground monitoring, there's room for expansion. The nice thing with the satellite derived data that we currently use is every year the group that we work with revamps their model and improves it. So every year from 1998 to that current year, say this year up to 2021, we get remodeled and slightly improved method of that, getting that PM 2.5 data, which is great. So that science continues to improve. And then with the ground monitoring data, we're exploring how to work with, say, various sensing groups, looking at their long-term data to assess at a more granular level, because something and a more timely level. So something that is a drawback with the satellite derived data is that it's from 2021, for example. And
Right.
if you work with local groups that are monitoring data on the ground, or say even government groups that are monitoring data on the ground in a more real-time fashion, you can give say a running annual average that kind of gives one a better sense and more current sense of what the air quality is like.
Right. So yeah, based on everything that we discussed, we know there is a data gap, but we know we are working on it, and there always needs to be more awareness about it, more pollution literacy. But is there something that you would like to suggest or recommend to a policymaker, which would probably help us tackle this air pollution problem and the data gap problem a little better?
Yeah, I would say, I think in terms of data gaps, if a policymaker is in a country or region where there's not any air quality data, say PM 2.5 data yet, I think it can be slightly overwhelming to think of like what building a whole air quality monitoring program looks like. And I would say that we've seen over and over again in places where you even put in a single monitor, say a reference grade monitor, but it doesn't have to be that, but something reliable and that can be there for the long term to measure PM 2.5 and to make that data openly available. We've seen how that's an amazing starting point for doing that work, and that doesn't take a ton of effort. Start small and see how it goes. I think is the way to go, and I think whether a government does that or not means they're balancing a lot of other priorities, and I think even just this zeroth order step of calculating the potential return on investment of putting up that monitor and the potential health rewards, I think it can be really illustrative of how little of an investment that truly is versus the cost.
True. I mean, I'm sure like there's a lot of investment that goes into it, but in the long term, the benefits are always going to be much more to a human health and to a human breathing this air. So since you co-authored the AQLI report, was there something that was startling even to you? Like, was there something that you were really shocked to see, and probably considering even air pollution has been going on as a recurring conversation, even in terms of the numbers for India and worldwide, was there something very startling to even you?
I think the most startling thing to me, and I had some awareness of it, but seeing that Asia and Africa bear 92% of the health burden in terms of life expectancy decrease from PM 2.5, and then seeing, how little funding, I think the two of them probably 23 million total get per year, and the continent of Africa gets $300,000 per year in philanthropic funds. That contrast, seeing where the burden, and where the investment is so flipped, and that was the most shocking to me.
So we had a few questions from school teachers and college professors from Delhi who wanted to know about if there were any, government initiatives that are working on air pollution. And I just wanted to, just answer on both our behalves that, Epic India and AQLI work mainly on evidence-backed research, and that's our forte. We essentially do not really have any other tools to fund or suggest government platforms. But if you have any idea that you think can solve or improve air quality, so please write to us on our Epic India email addresses. And somebody from Lady Irwin College had also asked that are the AQLI tools available for sharing basis? So I just wanted to answer for that as well, that AQLI is a global tool for social good and it's free, available, and the data can be downloaded by anybody at any time. So any other thoughts that you would like to add to it, Krista? These are
Yeah.
very essential basic questions, I think, like about the AQLI tool.
Yeah, so I will say something new this year that we've done is if you go on GitHub, and I think it's aqli.epic is our organization name, but we have all of the underlying, not just the data, but even our code and methodology on there open source. So that's also another tool for those perhaps a little more sophisticated, but it's a great resource.
Right. Any other closing thought, Krista? I mean, we just, wanted to start off this conversation at Epic India to have regular people ask us questions about AQLI, about air pollution, and, start this conversation about data gaps because it's essential in solving the air pollution crisis. Any last thoughts on it?
I think the last thought I have is, there's a lot to take away that's disheartening with reports like this often. But I think they're important to beat the drum every year to understand what the state of air quality is. But with that, I'll say, I firmly believe, I think we also have to keep in mind what the future can look like if we want it to, like having a positive image of what that can look like. And I think it's incredibly inspiring to know this is the worst our air quality could ever be. If we decide that right now, and going forward, it can only get cleaner and cleaner. So I hope that's the case and we can all work towards that.
That's a good image to go forward with. All right, Krista, I think it just brings us to the end of this Instagram Live session, but we hope to have you join us in many more. And thank you for taking the time out to have a little chat with us today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.